Hi everyone, Joe here. I've had a couple of requests to demonstrate the spreadsheet that I use for my standards-based grading implementation. So this is my video doing just that. And I am making this video with Zoom because at present I find it the simplest tool to use for these sorts of recordings. So I hope everything goes okay. At this point, you should be able to see my entire desktop, and I'm on an iMac running Mac OS Catalina with the latest updates applied. And the spreadsheet that I'm going to show you is implemented in Apple's Numbers spreadsheet app. I don't have readily available a copy of Microsoft Excel, so I haven't tested this spreadsheet under Excel. That is, I haven't exported it to an Excel format and tested it explicitly under Microsoft Excel. But there's nothing incredibly fancy about the macros that I use, so I don't really see any reason why it shouldn't work under Excel. As always, after the demo, if anyone is interested in actually getting the actual spreadsheet file, I will make it available, and you can use it and feel free to modify it as you see fit. Okay, so I'm going to open up the folder where I keep my template, and I'm going to make a duplicate of it just so I don't screw anything up. And I'm going to drag that duplicate to my Mac desktop, and then I'm going to close my folder here, and the duplicate is what I'm actually going to use. Okay, so here's the spreadsheet. There's really nothing fancy about it, but it does have some features that I've come to appreciate over the years. It's very highly automated internally, in that the grades and the grade distribution update in real time. I'll give you a demonstration of that in just a moment. And I'm kind of proud of it. I've used it for several years, and as a matter of fact, I think I've used it ever since the first year that I started implementing standards-based grading in my classes. And it has certainly evolved. As recently as last week, I added a few new features. So let's get down to business here. My class enrollments are capped at 24. So that's why there are slots for 24 students over here. This would be trivial to change if anyone wanted to change it. So to demonstrate this, let's create a hypothetical list of students. And I'm going to just create some random names here. I'll try to create them alphabetically. So let's populate this spreadsheet with some students. Let's use Amy. Let's use Bobby. Let's use Carl. Let's use Don. Let's use Emily. And let's use okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's our hypothetical class here of 6 students. Now, notice that when I typed in those names, certain cells over here automatically populated. And as it stands right now, every student in the class has an F. And you can see that there is a graph over here that, while we weren't looking, updated in real time. And it shows a histogram of the grade distribution. And you can see that I have 6 grades of F. Now, this is going to change as we modify the spreadsheet, and I'll of course demonstrate that. Okay. Notice also that the number of proficiencies has automatically populated to 0, and I'll say more about that in just a moment as well. Notice also that everyone's grade by default is a 50, and that is a percentage, so 50%. Which maps to an F on a 10-point scale. And I'll say more about that. Okay, so up here on, it's actually row 2 of the spreadsheet. This is where the names of the standards are entered. And right now in the template, I simply have S1, S2, and S3. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to change those right now. I'm just going to call this standard 1. I'm going to call this standard 2. Now these can be as complete or as incomplete as you want. You can make them descriptive. You can make them, pretty much anything. The idea is to have something, have a name, a label for each individual standard or goal in your class. And I'm going to add a couple more here. I'm going to add 5 for no good reason. There's nothing magic about 5. But what I want to show you is that as the standards in this row are populated over here on the other end of the spreadsheet, the number of standards is automatically updated. And in fact, this is nothing more than a count of the number of cells in the second row that have a non-empty heading in them. So if you want to get rid of a standard, watch this, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the spreadsheet. I'm going to get rid of standard number 5, and notice that on the other end of the spreadsheet, we should now see 4 standards. Okay, so this is how the spreadsheet keeps track of how many standards your students are, or my students in this case, are responsible for. Okay, and we can add to these anytime we want. So we can come back and I can put standard 5 back. And what the heck, let's add a 6th one. Okay, and just to check, we should now show 6 standards for which the class is responsible. And there you go, it updates it in real time. Also, in case it's not obvious, these columns here marked with do not edit or don't edit, these should not be manually edited because these cells house macros or formulas, whatever you want to call them, that rely on the content of other cells or that do computations like column BD here, which actually does the grade calculation. So these should not be manually edited. Okay, so how do I do my ratings? Well, I use a system of 3 ratings. If a student demonstrates proficiency, they get a PR. PR literally comes from the word proficient or proficiency. And the cell background will turn green when you enter a PR. And that indicates that the student has successfully met that standard and can then progress to assessing on other standards for the course. So it's very visual as well. Green means go on to the next standard and work on it. Also, there's a macro, or the cell is formatted, it's not a macro, the cell is formatted to automatically capitalize the letters that are entered. I just find it's more visually appealing, for me anyway, when the letters are capitalized. Okay, now, so incidentally, we should, if we go back to the grading end of the spreadsheet, we should now show that each student has received 1 PR. And notice that the numerical grades have risen from 50 to 58. We're still at the F level in terms of final grades. And I'm going to go over in detail how, the algorithm that I use for converting from proficiencies or PRs, as the students have come to call them, to the final letter grade. But just notice that this updated in real time. Okay, so I have 2 other options. What if a student makes an attempt but doesn't demonstrate proficiency? Well, the key there is that they are developing proficiency. And so I use the rating DE to stand for that. And what if they basically have not yet attempted a standard. I have NY, whoops, NY, which stands for not yet. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Mathematically, neither the DEs nor the NYs contribute to the final grade. It's all about the number of proficiencies. You can see the number of proficiencies hasn't changed since I entered the DEs and the NYs. This is just a visual way of indicating which students have attempted which assessments for the various goals in the course and which have not. To me, there's a slight psychological advantage in showing that a student has attempted but not quite gotten there versus not attempted at all. So at the end of the semester, if there's a goal that a student has never assessed on, then that ends up being an NY. And mathematically, it doesn't count towards the grade, as I said. Neither does the DE. But it's there basically as a way of keeping track with who has at least attempted a given assessment and who has not. You'll find that the students who get DEs, indicating developing proficiency, they are a bit motivated after seeing the yellow. They want to change those DEs to PRs, and that's good. So there's a bit of a motivation there. And I said when the student sees the yellow, the students don't actually see the spreadsheet. I mirror these ratings in a kludge of a grade book on Blackboard. Blackboard is not set up to do things like this. As you all probably know, Blackboard still very quaintly is set up really only for traditional grades, but I have a little kludge that I use. And unfortunately, it doesn't let me do the color coding, but this gives me visual feedback on who needs to assess on what. So, and of course, you can mix these in any column. Okay, and it's really just a simple matter of entering the appropriate rating in the column for the appropriate standard for a given student. Okay, and let me just sort of randomly populate these. And let's just say that standard 5 was pretty straightforward. Everybody was able to meet that goal. And let's do the same thing with standard 6, again, just for demonstration purposes here. Okay. So let's see, if I go to the grading end of the page, we should show that Amy has accumulated 4 PRs. Bobby has accumulated 4 PRs. Carl accumulated 5. We should see that Don has had some trouble and only accumulated 3 PRs. Emily and Fran each accumulated 4 PRs. And this is automatically reflected in this column over here. Okay, and now look at my grade distribution, look at my histogram. Oh, look, no one is failing. This is good. I have 1A, 6 Bs, and 1 C, and that matches the statistics in column BD here. Notice that I also get numerical scores here. So let me address how the numerical scores are generated. When I first decided to make the jump to standards-based grading, I was very heavily influenced by many people that I knew from Twitter. Kelly O'Shea is really the person who pushed me over the line. Kelly O'Shea teaches at a private high school in New York City. Andy Runquist at Hamline University, Josh Gates also teaching at a private high school, I believe. And of course, Frank Noscasi also teaching at a private high school. You can see I've been heavily, heavily influenced by my colleagues who teach in high schools. And Frank Noscasi maintains a blog called Action Reaction, Reflections on the Dynamics of Teaching. And I was very influenced by his August 23rd, 2012 post, Keep It Simple, Standards-Based Grading. And he suggests a very simple algorithm here. You take the number of proficiencies that a student racks up, divide that by the total number of standards, take that quotient, multiply it by 50, and then add 50. And this is the algorithm that I have always used. And you can see that is what is used down here. If you look at the actual formula that's used in the cell, that's exactly what it does. It takes the number of proficiencies for each student from column BA, and it divides that by the number of standards, which is the same for every student in the class. And it takes that quotient, that ratio, I guess it's a ratio since they have the same units. Well, they're both units, unitless. So I guess technically it's a ratio instead of a quotient. Anyway, it takes that ratio, for example, for this first student, which would be 4/6, multiplies it by 50, and then adds 50. It's very simple. Students seem to understand it. It does have a disadvantage, and that is that it doesn't account for the student's history in assessment attempts. I have many colleagues who have much more elaborate grading systems that, or I should say non-grading systems, assessment systems, whatever you want to call it. I try to avoid the use of the word grades, that account for the student's past history. I've heard of some colleagues saying that a student must demonstrate mastery 3 times in order for the grade to become, in order for the rating to become permanent. I don't do anything like that. I try very hard to just keep it as simple as possible for everyone involved. And so that's how this numerical score is generated. It's the number of PRs divided by the total number of standards, that ratio multiplied by 50, and add 50 points to it. So if a student does nothing in the class, their grade turns out to be a 50, which of course is an F, as it should be. But if a student does everything and learns everything, the ratio of proficiencies to standards becomes 1. And so you end up with a numerical score of 50 plus 50 times 1, which is 50 plus 50, which is 100. So if a student learns everything, they get 100%, which of course maps to an A. Now, at my institution, we use 10-point scales. Grading scales are arbitrary. I think we all understand that. I don't think administrators really understand that, but it's simple. And this is how I have it done in this spreadsheet. So I have some logic down here in a spreadsheet formula, macro, whatever you want to call it, that maps these numerical scores in column BC to letter grades based on a 10-point scale. And then I have a simple little histogram over here that plots the grade distribution for me. What if at the end of the semester, I decide that there is a standard that, standard number 3, for whatever reason, I may decide that standard number 3 is not appropriate and I want to drop it. I can simply delete the heading from that cell, and now the spreadsheet should update and show that there are only 5 standards that the students are responsible for. The number of proficiencies updates accordingly, the numerical scores and letter grades update accordingly, and of course the grade distribution updates accordingly. Now I have 7 A's and 1 B. So you see that changed the grading distribution significantly. There is another way. I'm going to put that label back. There is another way. I can come to the end of the spreadsheet here, and in this cell, I can type a -1. That means I'm going to drop 1 standard. And you can see that has the effect of eliminating the heading at the top of the column for one of the standards. This is just an alternate way of achieving the same result. oh, I want to be nice this semester. I want to drop a standard. It's been a rough semester for everybody. Show a little grace here. Let's drop a standard. And I can just enter a -1. I can also enter a -2 if I want to drop 2 standards and so forth. But mathematically, it's the same as eliminating the heading at the top of a standards column. So I'm gonna enter 0 for that. That's the default. Okay. And I think that's pretty much everything. There are no points to deal with. That is just so incredibly important here. There are no points to be gained here. Everything is a binary. Basically, students either demonstrate proficiency or they don't. They always have multiple opportunities to demonstrate proficiency. So anything that's not a PR, students have if they have the initiative, they have the right to keep reassessing until they reach a PR to turn that cell green if they want to. Unfortunately, not every student wants to do that, but that's okay. It's their choice, right? A couple of other features here. Down here at the end, you can put descriptions of the standards like this. Like, for example, this first standard, I can articulate a justification for working in groups like some scientists do, and for working individually like other scientists do. And then down here, you can even put potential or exemplar assessment questions. Remember, students don't actually see this spreadsheet, so it's okay to put the assessment questions or suggested assessment questions, not necessarily the ones you use on any given assessment attempt. So it's okay to populate these cells if you want to. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It just kind of depends. I do like to put the articulation of the standard in cells down here. So each standard would ideally have a corresponding explanation in row 27, populating the last cell in that standard, or the next to last cell in that standards column. And of course, this is all editable. And this has nothing to do with the scores or the grades or anything like that. It's just a bookkeeping thing. I think that's about it. It's very simple to use. This goes out to column AY, and of course that can be changed. And if that is changed, then the macros that do all the computation over here, those would all have to be adjusted to reflect the number of cells used. I can't imagine a course having this many standards. Frank Nascasi recommended, I believe it was about 5 standards per unit. And that's comparable to what I do in my physics classes. They're even less granular than that. I tend to go for very broad standards. I've just decided that that's better because any detailed checklist of standards, it's always inherently going to be incomplete because I just think it's not always productive to come up with an extremely detailed list of goals and standards. I think it's kind of fruitless because any such list is always going to be somewhat incomplete. So I'm going for broadness rather than micro detail here. And I find that that the students tend to prefer that as well. Okay, so I think that's about it. If you have any questions, please let me know. And if you're interested in getting a copy of this, I will make it available to you. Again, it's done with Apple numbers. If you would like to test it with Excel, by all means, feel free. I hope this video has been useful, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.